We're back, our dear viewers, with our guest this evening. She's Dr. Randa Diab-Bahman, Assistant Dean and also Social Scientist. Dr. Randa, welcome back to Hala Kuwait. It's really a pleasure to have you again with us with new information, of course, you will share with us this evening.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
The pleasure is ours. And we're wondering also, like, you have this book. We'd like to see it, please. Yeah.
Of course.
It's called The Handbook of Business Essentials, and it's the Middle East edition. So what really inspired you to write this academic book, and also what gap does it fill in higher education in the Arab world specifically, or let's talk especially it's the Middle East edition.
I think I needed to highlight that a bit more. It's a bit small on the writing, but this is the whole gist of it. So it's a Middle East edition. So what inspired me initially to write this book is that basically there was a need for it. When I was whilst I was teaching the classes, I've always had to, of course this was over the span of 10 to 15 years. You know, this is something that's been ongoing. So throughout my career, I've realized that I needed multiple sources multiple resources in order to fulfill whatever criterion I needed to fulfill in the classroom. So over the years, I've collected many different, from many different resources, and I've seen that my colleagues were doing the same thing. Why? Because we had a need to contextualize content related more towards the Middle Eastern stakeholder, if you will. Of course, the stakeholder being the student, as well as the teacher in most cases, in that it needed to be more Middle Eastern, it had more Middle Eastern touches. So with that being said, we tried to collect as much information as possible and streamline it or turn it into something that could be relatable, as opposed to what we see in the classroom. Sometimes we face barriers. So we embarked on a very informal study, which is more of a research kind of questionnaire-like. And we said, hi students, what would you like to see in front of you? What are some of the barriers that you are facing in higher education? So of course the number one barrier was language. The number two barrier, or amongst the top five, let's see, was the cost of the book. Number three was that, not number three, I don't quite remember the
specific number.
Correct. So this was, you know, the top things that we found was that there were multiple barriers, and we tried to address them in this book, in that if you hold the book from the front, it's all in English, and then if you turn it the other side, it's all in Arabic. So that's one of the main barriers.
That's great.
Yes.
It's really helpful. It's
yes.
really helpful for the students, and also it's great that you mentioned that you're taking their opinion because they're part of the educational process, and they're one of the main factors of the educational process. We cannot do anything, or you cannot do anything, and also your colleagues, if students don't exist.
Of course, and your feedback is always important because it helps you refine your craft. So as a teacher, if something is too difficult for the student, it also makes my life difficult. So once we realized that these barriers could be implemented in a different way or in a more simpler way, we decided to collect our resources that we came up with ourselves, which is something common academics do. And I think most academics do use multiple resources, especially nowadays where you've got many different angles and many different topics that are embedded within one another. So it's impossible to use one whole book like we used to. Remember back in the day there was one book for chemistry, one book. This stuff doesn't exist. So another one of the barriers that we managed to tackle in this book is that we consolidated maybe 4 to 5 different business courses, and we stuck to the essentials, something like a consolidated approach to teaching, as well as a simplified English, and using lingo that's more understandable to my students who are second language English learners. The price is also very much a fraction of what a typical book would cost. And I think with that being said, most academics do use their own resources to whatever degree. Some even come up with their own content very regularly. It's not uncommon to do that. But I think where this book elevates that is that it's an actual academic publisher, which took us that long way, as opposed to just taking it to the printer and giving it out in the classroom. So those are the main elements that we incorporated, and it was all based on our needs, which were part of the students' needs as well.
Of course, of course. So we're talking now to a well-prepared Dean Assistant.
That's right.
Dr. Randa. So for a well-prepared Dean Assistant, Dr. Randa, we have also well-prepared question from our producer, where we would like to ask you about the limitations, since you mentioned the difficulties and the problems facing students in higher education. What are some of the limitations using specifically American Middle East editions or international texts that are not contextually tailored?
Sure.
It caused some difficulties?
A lot of difficulties, and that's partly why we faced what we faced, in that we couldn't find the content that we needed in order to not only for the students to learn in those, given those barriers that we previously mentioned, but also from a teacher's perspective. The more I can connect with my audience, the more I can connect my audience to the outside world, I can easily just come in and read from the slides or just be given a book, which is conventionally what we do. It's sad for me to see that we have to resort to, for example, North America or Europe, to ask or find authors that do somewhat tailor their books to us. So it's not from most of the books that we found. Now we see here and there's a couple of books that are written by Arabs with this particular title, Middle Eastern edition. But the majority of them are written by non-Arabs. And they give their perspective as to what the Middle Eastern edition should look like. So my colleagues and I said, no, why don't we do it from a first-person point of view, as well as incorporate these barriers that we know very much exist in higher education in Kuwait. You don't even have to go to research level in order to realize that we have these barriers, and we try to apply and address them in this book.
Definitely. So why it's important? Like when you mentioned curriculums from the United States, from Europe, from different countries, not related mostly to the Arab world, when you share it with students, is it connecting 100%? I believe not. So that's why we would ask, is it important for higher education institutions in the Arab world to books or use books authorized by local scholars, same as you and your colleagues and many other scholars? So comparing it to international editions, which one can fit more with the understanding of students?
I think early on it was just a notion that anything that you contextualize, whether it's an educational book, whether it's a concept, even a theory, if you will, it was just a notion that perhaps you should contextualize it because there are local variables that need to be accounted for. Now, this is pure science. So once you consider that, over the years, that notion has become almost a must. There's no way I could survive, and for anything, not just a book, for anything to be sustainable, it must be contextual. It will reach that life cycle stage where the locals are going to say, no, we have needs. We have something that you need to address, and I'm happy to see that that notion has now become something that we really need to pay attention to, not just because indicators are telling me, but because now knowledge is so widely available that why not? Why don't we put our touch on it? We are able, we are capable, we've reached the stars, why don't we reach for the academic world?
Definitely,
right?
Definitely. So that's why it's getting controversial. It's getting controversial. Some opinions and some people, they say we send students abroad, maybe some fields of knowledge they have or they own the advancement when it comes to many fields of knowledge in Europe or in the United States or any other continents other than the Arab world. And of course we have advantages in some fields of knowledge. But how does having books written specifically for the Middle East contribute to the development of local scholarship? Let's talk about the local scholarship. Like students don't need to go abroad anymore and study their master's degree and also their PhD in their own country or a neighbor country nearby us.
Absolutely. I mean, this is a whole circle. This is more like things that work in synergy. So I know that the medical field, for example, in Kuwait is, getting international recognition as to what they're doing. I know that we've got a few institutes here that are doing some grand research, and that's getting really, really good recognition. So this is just part of that plan to go ahead and aim for higher and higher. So we have capable bodies, we have capable minds. It's just a matter of connecting the dots and really putting our minds towards a goal that is whatever you want it to be. So in my case, I said, well, this could complement everything that we're doing. Yes, we already have this in place, Mr. Mohammed. We already have the fact that many students who used to go abroad or felt the need to go abroad, we've got some really good institutes here and now. So within that synergy, this is just another organic way to grow that idea that we're here, we are credible, we are just as credible as our colleagues in in other parts of the world.
Exactly.
And perhaps at some point we were maybe lacking that edge or
Can be.
elevating it. So this is our contribution to that.
So let's talk further than the classroom. Let's go into the society. And how does the contextualizing academic content benefit the society as a whole society, not only the classroom? Because some people, they might believe what you learn in the classroom, you might not apply 100% when you go to your work or being an employee in the future and with the future endeavors. So we need it to be implemented in the society. So does it work with the society?
It must. Again, it's that idea that it used to be an idea, a notion. Oh, by the way, you should contextualize. Now, let me give it to you in a different perspective. So for the longest time, we go to the classroom and we take our notes and we read the slides, and then we go into the real world and it's a complete disconnect. It's like, oh, this is something I learned in the classroom. It stays in the classroom. So for us to go into this contextualization mode is not only engaging the student, it's also allowing them to understand their value, their contribution, and how they can take whatever they learn and implement it in a way that suits them to their best ability. Because contextualization isn't just that I wrote it in Arabic. It's also how was the teacher able to connect with the student, and how was the student able to connect with the content. So for example, if I use a case study that's more relevant to them than XYZ company in New Zealand, for example, right? They're more able to understand. This is a very classic way of how we connect with students. So to embed that within a book, within that framework of contextualization goes a very long way. And the consolidation part of it is, because I know that students aren't going to sit there and listen to me blab on about something that they're not really connected to. They're just there to basically take notes and take their degree, if you will. So when they feel that connection, when they get it, they themselves come to me and say, I talked to my mom about this the other day. You were right. Some of them said, oh, I talked to my kids about this. And so that connection goes a long way. Once they step out of the classroom, that gap between reality and inside the class shrinks. And that's where the magic happens. That pours into society, society pours back into the education system, and this is just another complementary way to grow our society.
Yeah, and let's talk about the organizational culture, and let's go to schools, not universities and colleges. Like far from the academic life, we notice sometimes at schools, if some specific teachers, they have a successful system with their curriculum and their students, the new teachers will follow them, and it will create a new culture in the work environment. So when it comes to the culture in the society, how does it influence the teaching styles in the Middle East? Like we're having, would like an answer from your behalf when it comes to the huge example about the Middle East, and how does your book account for that? Tell us about the content that your book reflects and shares new information about this subject to our viewers and us also.
I love that you mentioned that one good thing, once somebody recognizes it could also work in their favor. It's something we label positive stigma, right? So it becomes something that you want to adopt, something that you want to grow into.
Always.
So for me and you, it's always, but sometimes it comes across too strong. However, when they realize the value of it, that, you know what, you can have this book and teach it for 4 years in a row in different courses. Not just this book, but I mean the idea of a system that works. Once they catch on to the value of that, it becomes almost instantly that everybody starts following. So sometimes they start off being really wary about it. They don't know, it's new. This is very typical psychology. But once they catch on to the advantages of it, it really, really starts going into that domino effect where everybody wants to be involved. So it's a matter of a pull tactic. It's more of a pull tactic than it is a push tactic. I can't come to my colleagues and say, here, you must use this book. But once they realize that it's working, and this is, we even reach out to other colleagues and say, do you want to start building other books pertaining to different subjects.
Exactly.
So once they see that that network is growing and it's doing them good. Of course, we're all selfish humans at the end of the day. We want what's good for us just as well what's good for you. So if I'm doing a good job towards my students, whether it's be on a high school level or a university level, once they see the impact of that, it reflects back on me.
Always.
So
Sometimes, yeah, let's say sometimes for most of the colleagues or your colleagues, and talking in general. And I believe our viewers, you learned from Dr. Randa about the teaching ways and styles when it comes to the Middle East and also locally. And I believe it's time now to talk about the learning ways also, not the teaching ways and the teaching styles, also the learning styles. But after this report, stay with us. We're back with our guest this evening, Dr. Randa Diab-Bahman, Assistant Dean and Social Scientist. Welcome back, Doctor, and we are really curious now at the moment and at this stage of the interview to learn more and about the learning styles of students in the Arab world and how it's different from the Western students, and how did you address that in your book?
You know, again, it's all about the student at the end of the day. Whether I'm successful or not, it's really what the student takes from me and with the impression that they leave, and even, you know, sometimes feedback. So the way that we address it, in maybe the way I address it perhaps, is to make it as culturally positive as possible. In what ways do I mean that? I can learn how to teach in many different schools. I can take my degree in teaching. I can take whatever certification that I need to elevate the profile of me as a teacher. But if I can't connect to my student, and again, this is also marketing basics, right? If you can't connect with the audience, you're just gonna fail. The difference is between a marketing product and a school system is that the poor kid doesn't really have a big say in what he does at the end of the day. However, if I were to compare it to a product, no, the product is basically your reputation on the line. If they like it, you're going to make money. If you don't, you're not going to make money. So unfortunately, kids are stuck. This is a story as old as time.
Yeah, it's endless.
It never ends. So in order to save the day, the way I go about it is also with that framework in mind, that it's about the culture. What is important? What does value mean to my stakeholder, which is the student, which is, by the way, my product and my customer at the same time? So it's a little different in higher education as opposed to...
Great description.
Yeah, right? So I have to keep that in mind all the time. He's my product and my customer at the same time. So when I put it in perspective, there's not many disciplinary measures I can take with an adult. I can't raise my voice. I can't, you know, there's many teachers who do. I can't, you know, use physical, whatever.
Cannot be forced education.
You can't. At the end of the day, there's just no way. So the approach that has worked with me is, again, this idea of contextualization. If you say to someone, you know what, I'm kind of ashamed of what you're doing. I'm kind of sad. I'm kind of disappointed. Once you start taking that approach, they tend to listen. Once you start using the religiosity part of it, where it's like, no, this is just not okay with God, for example. These are the values that we grew up with. As opposed to, you know, a typical classroom elsewhere, they would probably forbid teachers from using these tactics. But when we look at the Arabian context, we look at what is of value. It's the same thing with a customer when I'm selling them. What is of value to my customer, target customer? Is it just the education process? No, this is the whole experience. They're spending a whole lot of time. Their parents are invested in it. So when you give them the basic values that they've learned at home, and you reference those, and you mirror them yourself, you can't tell them, in English, what would they be? The equivalent of, or somewhere along the lines of, this is right, this is wrong.
You don't represent it.
If you don't represent it yourself. If you're not ethical yourself, believe me, the student will pick up on it like in a blink of an eye. If you're not authentic, if you're not respecting them just as much as you would like them to respect you, if you use these embedded values that are so important that we grew up with at home, you connect on so many levels. And that's worked for me repeatedly. So my advice is, if you really want to get to the gist of it, this is where to start.
Exactly. And also, we really want to know about the locally produced academic literature and its role in shaping the research culture in the Arab world. How does it change the face of research culture in the Arab world?
So we know that we've got a long way to go when it comes to social sciences. So we've got, and this is something I commonly, comment about, whether it's through, whatever platform that I'm using, where it's the social sciences are kind of left behind. We do focus more on the STEM, which is the more hard sciences, if you will. Then the idea of contextualization comes a bit isolated. Why? Because if I'm not taking care of the whys of why we are not meeting certain indicators.
Exactly.
This is where we fall short, perhaps. The social sciences isn't just something that is of an opinion, for example. It's not my opinion or your opinion. It's called social sciences because it's a science. It's a soft science in the sense that you can't really feel it or touch it. It's not tangible. However, these are the hidden elements that usually make or break whatever else we put on the table in order to create the value chain or the equation to reach a certain goal.
Exactly. That's how it is. So it's such a valuable information you shared with us this evening, Dr. Randa, and we're really thankful to you for this information. But before we end this inspiring interview, specifically about local academic research and many subjects related to it, can you please share with us an advice you would like to give to other scholars and your colleagues also about producing the region-specific academic materials?
My colleagues, I know for sure, if most of them, if not all of them, have created their own content to some degree or another. My advice is reach out to each other, network, get together. I think we all have a standard way of collecting information and resources. We fall short in going that extra mile, not because we're lazy or we don't have the capacity to do it. It is a lot of work. It is a lot of peer review as well, especially if you're going the academic route. It's a lot of extra work, and to be honest, you don't really get recognized for it. It doesn't count like a research project, for example. This is called an academic project at best. So it doesn't necessarily always have a motivation to it, but once you get it, I'm sure my colleagues know the value of having your own book academically peer reviewed from an academic publisher. My advice is just keep going. You're going to get there. As a matter of fact, they're looking for you at this stage.
Well, that's really great. And from me and all the crew of Hala Kuwait, we wish you a lovely evening. And thank you so much, Doctor, for being this evening with us on Hala Kuwait, and wish you the best of luck with your future endeavors and this academic year also.
Thank you very much.
Many thanks to you, Doctor. The viewers, we just had with us Dr. Randa Diab-Bahman, Assistant Dean and Social Scientist. Up next, we have a very special report to share with you, so please stay tuned.